Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Material Matters with Grant Gibson. The show has been running for over 6 years now. However, for listeners who might be new to all this, the idea is I speak to a designer, maker, artist or architect about a material or technique with which they're intrinsically linked and discover how it changed their lives and careers. Today I'm talking to Bonnie Hvillum. Bonnie is a Danish designer and founder of Natural Materials Studio, which, as the name suggests, makes its own materials using natural resources and various waste streams. Working at the meeting point between material science, art and design, the studio creates products, installations, exhibitions and research projects, working for clients such as Adidas, Klein, Noma, Dinesen, Copenhagen Contemporary and the Danish Architecture Centre. Bonnie will also be part of Material Matters London, which takes place from the 17th to the 20th of September at Space House, so kind of imminently, with her education platform, The Material Way, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Bonnie, thank you very much for doing this. How are you?
I'm good.
Oh, good.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to start this conversation because I've been a little bit...
We've had things going on, right? You're on maternity leave. This is This is where we're heading. You've not been to the studio for a long time. Yeah,
I'll come, and I get an overview of things. But there are some great people that are running things on behalf of me, so that's really nice.
And how is motherhood? This is number 3, I think.
Yes. This is the last one.
How's it going?
No, it's really good. I mean, it gets better. Every time you get more kind of into it and really intuitive. And no, she's really lovely and she's really easy and she just gets along with things and she's already like a good extra person down in the studio. So it's good. Yeah.
Good. We have a tradition on this podcast of asking guests to describe their studios. Now, obviously, as you've alluded to, you've been popping in, but you've not been there for a while. Am I right in thinking you live on a farm? You have chickens and things?
Yeah, we live on a little farm south of Copenhagen, but still in like a good, just about biking distance to the studio and the city. It's just a really good compromise, really. And so, yeah, we have a kitchen garden and we have chickens and we have horses next door and yeah.
Nice.
And then we have the studio in the city.
Well, I was going to ask, the studio is probably quite different.
Yeah. I mean, it's like in the city, you saw it in winter. It's like in a residential kind of area, actually, but I was really lucky to find it many years ago. It's like a bit of a high basement with high ceilings. We got good light, so we can test things and we can be messy. These places are a little bit rare to find actually nowadays because we're working with a lot of water, so we can be, wet casting and we can just be messy on the floor. And it's a good combination. In a way, I don't feel like we require that much. We have so many kind of needs when we do our work. At the same time, it's a bit of a funny combination, our studio, of a laboratory, atelier, kitchen, design studio. So it's a really mix of things. We're really tapping into many different ways of working.
So one of the reasons I was keen to get you onto the podcast is this educational platform, The Material Way, that you've co-founded with curator Rita Trindade, which will be at Material Matters London. But what will you be showing?
Well, we'll be showing the students or participants, this year's group that we've had on the learning platform. We'll be showing their work at the Material Matters. So maybe just a few words around The Material Way.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me a little bit more about it. I mean, why did you decide to start it in the first instance?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, actually. I believe in learning and collaboration. And I think that the people that we get on board are the same mentality in like learning from each other and facilitating this community that we are growing with this platform. And it's like a global community. And we really try to encourage this shared learning environment where we can learn from each other. But then all the participants are working with materials that they find locally where they're based. So people tap in from all over the world and then we meet online and then share the learning and the developments of these materials that they are creating and material research in different ways. And then I try to put together an inspirational program for these participants with internal teachers and external lectures. And we really try to create this dynamic learning environment. But yeah, meeting online and then having these developments going on throughout the week, and then helping each other to grow and develop the materials and understanding the concepts around the materials. And from that on, try to build a project. And that's what we'll be showing at Material Matters. It's the kind of the final projects that they have created and works.
How did you and Rita meet in the first place? Because I'm right in thinking she's from Lisbon?
Yeah.
So how did you meet?
We met in Copenhagen. She worked at that time for a Copenhagen-based company. And so we met through shared people and founded the platform. And it was during COVID. In the start, we didn't have the platform, the name Material Way, but we just ran it as collaboration, these like programs. And then we discovered that we could expand, or we needed to expand on the program because there was so much learning we wanted to, and the students, when we left them, it felt like just like a platform that could really grow in many ways. So in the start, we ran courses several times during the year, shorter courses. And then we really discovered, okay, let's focus on a year program where we have a lot of good time to go in depth with each projects and materials and really get the materials developed and worked through, and also try to encourage the final project or like a bit of a direction for the project so that you can really understand where the whole kind of research project. And so that's kind of why it's finishing soon in London. And then we start a new course.
How many students in a cohort?
Around 30. We have the capacity for around 30.
When they're using local materials, they come from all over the world, these people. What kind of materials have they used?
Yeah, I mean, they tap into like the local habitats, really. And no matter if they live in the jungle or they live in the desert or they live in the city, like they tap into like just what they can find. I think that's what we really encourage. And of course, we encourage natural materials, but also sometimes people tap into more post-production waste and materials, which is also something we discuss and learn about how to understand these production systems. And we really try to give a broad understanding of materials, waste materials and natural materials, and then give a broad understanding of polymers and the technicality of creating materials. And then from that on, just try and mentor, encourage and grow the projects with them. And then again, foster this community where we help each other so they can help each other also along the way. But all sorts of materials really, like from rare kind of soils to plants and historical materials, cultural materials, all sorts really. That's what you can come and discover.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the results myself.
Yeah.
So when you're not doing that, you're running the Natural Material Studio, which you launched in 2019, which is actually the year this podcast launched as well. So there you go, 2019, very good year for materials. How big is it nowadays? How many people do you employ?
We're 4 in the studio now.
Okay.
With various skills. Again, as I mentioned in the start of the studio kind of setup, is a quite hybrid place that taps into a lot of different competences and skills and ways of working. So people come with various backgrounds. And then obviously we have our different roles in the studios.
Can you define exactly what the studio does? Because what you do is quite unusual, I think.
Yeah, well, I don't know, unusual. But at least we're trying to set like a bit of a new agenda maybe. So unusual, I don't know. But I think what we do in the studio is on a more like visionary kind of state maybe, is that we try to change our understanding of materials. And maybe try to push the boundaries of what we can do with materials. I think that's maybe the core essence of it. I think I've always been really curious about our, as humans, interaction with materials and with the world in general. And so that's the starting point for all the projects, all the research and all the works that we create and installations. It's quite human-centered, but also obviously with a emphasis and starting point with nature. I think that's kind of where it all starts. And then, as I mentioned before, around with our students, I think it's the same way we work in the studio, where we really try to enhance and encourage the narrative that the materials would hold, and let that drive the projects or hold the narrative of the concept or the whatever project we're working on. But where the materials are coming from has a lot of story to tell. And I have this feeling that it becomes like this fluid state where we bring a lot of history and knowledge from these materials, and then we create these like new types of materials. So in a way, we kind of bonding history with future in like a quite, maybe a little bit poetic way in the present state. That's at least what we're trying to do. And then we really try to work with this material-driven design methodology where we understand the materials and we work with the technicalities of the materials and aesthetics and then design from that starting point. Whereas I see a tendency where we sit at the drawing table and draw a lot of things up and then we apply materials afterwards.
Yeah. Okay. So you're materially led, in other words.
Exactly. So we're turning it upside down. Yeah.
Yeah. You've worked on numerous projects with brands like Adidas, Calvin Klein, the brilliant restaurant Noma. As you said in the intro, you've done installations in Copenhagen Contemporary and the Danish Architecture Centre. Was it difficult to get that initial foothold, to get going, to persuade people that what you were doing had value?
I think it was difficult to keep going. So keep going, even at the times where I was not getting that like as much response, or people didn't understand quite what I was doing. But I think maybe my advantage has been that I've always been quite curious about scale and how can we make it bigger or how can we scale this up. So I think quite quickly I came from moving from research and then moving it into applied work or using it for something. It wasn't enough for me to just sit and develop and research, which I see other people doing and they've done fantastic because what they have mastered is to really grow in a more industrial way, maybe, or commercial scale with their materials or technological way. I don't know, but it's just not my energy or pace, I think. And because I've always been really curious of creating these experiences for people or for people, the interaction with people and spaces and sites. And it's always been my agenda really to bring it out. And maybe that's been the advantage really. There's been created these experiences that people can understand and connect with.
Yeah. Was there a breakthrough moment, Bonnie, where you, after setting the studio up, you thought, yes, I can make this work. People are going to understand what it is I'm doing?
Yeah, I mean, we've had numerous kind of good projects where it's been like, as you say, like that feeling where, okay, this is really going to work. But I think first time where we showed at least our textiles in a more commercial setting, we did an installation with Frama in Copenhagen back in, I don't know, 21 maybe. And I think that was the first time where we stepped into a more commercial sphere, and a lot of architects kind of understood that these materials and our work could function not just as a research, but it actually can work out in the real world. And I think just then projects leads to the next project. And then, yeah, that's kind of how it went.
This probably sounds like a really ridiculous question, but we have a mixed audience, and I'm going to ask it anyway. How easy is it to find your ingredients for the materials you create, particularly to begin with?
The whole basis of our work is based on some different compositions depending on the projects, but we mainly with these, or we are only working with natural polymers that can be sourced from plants or from animal waste, and these kind of like waste flows that we try to tap into. I think we could, if we wanted to and we had the space to do it, we could like kind of refine it all and process it all from the very start in the studio, but we don't have the capacity to do that, so that we're cheating a little bit and getting the polymers prepared. But then from that on, it's basically just created in the studio and casted in the studio, and so everything is made locally. And then we source everything as we can from Denmark, at least like our fibers and particles and pigments and everything we can source. And then we have some good suppliers in Northern Europe that we work with for larger kind of amounts of polymers and such. So we set it up some good supplier systems in that sense. So we try to stay as local as possible, really.
And can we talk about process? How actually do you make your materials? I'm guessing, having been in your studio, it felt like there was quite a lot of craft and handwork involved in what you do.
Yeah, so again, the studios are quite mobile, so we can move things a little bit away and put things out. But basically, we have a casting process. So we're casting the textiles that we make, and which we are working most with at the moment, our biotextiles. We're casting them in hand on the floor. And then it has like drying time, 3-4 days, and then we can then peel the textiles off and then they're kind of dry and set. So it's actually really simple. It sounds simple, but then there's a lot of technicalities in the scale that we're working with and the amount that we can work with. So we can make around 100 square meters a week. I think people have the understanding that it takes long time to make these natural materials. And then when they actually realize how fast we can work, no, it's really exciting because we can put some tempo on things, and because we have everything in-house and everything, is managed from in-house, we can really push the button really fast and get things in motion. So I feel like the projects that we've been working on has quite often been with short project spans, really. And I really enjoy that because we can create this momentum really in the studio, and we can manage the time as well, and we don't have to outsource things. We can keep it within our own studio.
Yeah. But if we took, say, White Utopia, which is a project you did for 3 days of design last year, where you made an entire interior from the curtains to the sofa out of the same protein-based bioplastic called Procell. How did you do that?
I don't know how we did that project.
Well, it was an extraordinary thing. It was easily my favorite thing at 3 days of design.
Okay, cool.
So, what is Procell exactly, and how do you make it?
It's this combination really of this polymer and then a natural softener that we have been testing and researching for a long time. And then we use water and heat, and that's the kind of the basis. We use chalk as well. So it's a kind of a combination of simple raw materials that I've just found a way to combine in this scale capacity. And then we just discovered a lot of ways we can take it. It's like, okay, if we tune down on the softener, then it behaves like this. If we tune up on the softener, then it behaves like this. What happens when we mechanically foam the material? Will it hold the air? And like all these things. So, I mean, I think White Utopia was just like a culmination of all this like years of research that we've been carrying out in the studio and really showing at least like kind of a hypothesis of how we could live and work and have basically a whole house made of these materials. I think it was really fun to put it out there because I think people got really surprised. I know you saw it also. I mean, some of the objects were not like perfect. The dining table were like really, really wonky kind of style.
It was a bit wonky.
But it was really funny because for me, it really showed like a parallel universe that at least I believe more in than the way that we are currently producing and creating, because basically everything that was in that installation could be put it down in a massive melting pot and then it could just be recreated. Like there was no structure, everything was made out of these like raw components that can be recasted and reshaped into another project. So imagine if you put it all this into like a container, say, or like massive melting pot, and then just like, it is like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory in a way.
What you're saying is you could melt your entire interior and recast it as something else.
Yeah, you could take that whole installation, which was like a reminiscence of a house, and remake it again somewhere else.
That's kind of interesting. It dovetails with a quote that I read of yours in Dinesen about that project, where you said that you were basically investigating fluidity. That's presumably what you mean, the fact that these pieces don't need to be set in the form that they are permanently. You can do whatever you like with them subsequently.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like the word fluidity, and I really like the philosophy around it. It's based on conversations I've had with various people, including a fantastic anthropologist called Tim Ingold, who is based in Aberdeen. We had him as a guest lecturer at the Material Way actually last year, and as a research for that and involvement of that, then we had some really fascinating conversations, and it really got me understanding this philosophy of fluidity and really starting to understand our world more fluid, because everything is in motion, and it makes a lot of sense, really. It's really basic, isn't it? Like nature and even humans, we got going round, and everything is in cycles. We're not creating the world like that at the moment. Things are created quite linear and has a bit of an ending point. So I think suddenly I realized how fluid my practice and processes and materials actually were. And I think that's what really made me wanted to make that point.
Hope you're enjoying the show. This is to remind you that Material Matters London is almost here. In fact, by the time you listen to this, it may well be happening. It runs from the 17th to the 20th of September at Space House, which is on the outskirts of Covent Garden, so it's super, super central. We have a plethora of amazing exhibitors joining us this year, ranging from major brands and organisations such as Anglepoise, AHEC Europe and 3M, manufacturers like Tarket, Impact Acoustic and Low Carbon Industrial, and companies you might not know so much about, including Chinese fashion labels Zugzag22 and Hvillum Materials from Taiwan. There are features from the likes of Priestman Good, the Wood Awards and the Only Natural Design Competition, and of course designers and makers who are confounding our expectations when it comes to materials. It's going to be great, and it's free for architects and designers, but you must register. For more details, go to our website, materialmatters.design. And while I have you, it's important to point out that we've also just opened a virtual bookstore. It contains a slew of carefully curated titles, many from authors who have featured on the podcast. Writers to look out for include Glenn Adamson, Zandra Rhodes, Nigel Coates, Alice Robinson, Edmund Duval, Robin Givan, and Patrick Grant, to name just a few. You can find it on our websites, and I'll put a link in the blurb that comes with this episode. Happy shopping. Over the years, you've added other things to ProCell in your practice. Beer waste, brick dust spring to mind. Why those particular waste streams, and how did they affect the finished result?
Yeah, I think that's what's really fun about this base. I think I would call it like this, base material that we have created, that we can incorporate things and particles and fibers from other waste streams, and then it changes the whole performance of the materials and aesthetic of the materials. And then again, we start with a new material. So it takes all these branches really every time we do these projects. For me, it's the technicality and the aesthetics, because they bring the aesthetic to the material as well. So the project, as you say, we brew spent grains from this brewery called Open. We did an installation, we collaborated with the bar they had in the airport, and made these panels. But they kind of created the whole aesthetic and the whole expression of the materials. It was the spent grains so I think that's what's really fun. And then for me, it's the narrative that these materials hold. So for example, we worked, as you say, with crushed demolition bricks, and suddenly we started conceptualizing on, okay, wait a minute, now we created a flexible brick in a way, which is really, it's the complete opposite of when we think about a brick. It's like a solid element that we build, straight, or we can build curves, but it's a very solid, straight brick. And suddenly we're making these semi-translucent, flexible, soft textiles. Is a complete opposite. So it's really playing with these contrasts and perceptions that we have of materials, and all the just try to push the boundaries really. I think that's the essence really of why we incorporate all these different materials.
When you talk about aesthetics, fundamentally what you're saying is, it seems to me you can't draw the pieces that you create. They're not drawn before. It's what comes out from the material.
Yeah. I'm not really bad drawer, really. I don't draw because I have people now in the studio that understand how to draw, but it's not how it started. It started in a very tactile and a really hands-on way, because it's the way that we kind of learned. It was through the hands and just iterations of trial and error, really.
The other project I'm interested in and saw while I was out in Copenhagen at the beginning of this year is the work you've been doing with the flooring company Dinesen and the architect Kim Lenschow with sawdust. You created 4 different biomaterials out the dust. So how did you go about doing that, and what did you do? Yeah,
so I think with we call it now the project, we call the project Smul now, because Smul means sawdust.
Yes, I saw it. I had no idea how to pronounce it.
No, I know. It's a bit funny. So basically what we did, we started 3-4 years ago now. Of course, I came with a lot of material understanding and knowledge, and same did Kim. And Kim has an architect background. But what we did was that we took we started from scratch again. And then what we wanted was to work only with polymers, biopolymers that comes from trees themselves. So the tree source. So everything was like from trees. And that was the kind of the constraint that we set. So we worked a lot with like cellulose and the resins from trees and the lignin from tree and these types of polymers that can actually be extracted from trees. And then obviously with the sawdust and different sizes of sawdust, the small particles, the larger fibers. And it was like one big open exploration, really. And then over the years, we've kind of pushed it further and further and further. And actually, we're having an installation, I'm talking now, 9th of September, but this coming week in Oslo with new objects again in Dinesen showroom up in Oslo. So we're trying to push it all the time. We have these kind of phases that we work on, and we set it up in new installation in the spring at Danish Architecture Centre. They had a large group exhibition called Redefining Beauty, and we did a installation for there as well. Where again, we tried new materials, new combinations, new polymers, again, from within tree. So we connecting with a lot of tree enthusiasts and tree experts, and just like learning. Yeah, I mean, Kim is Norwegian and I'm Danish. Becomes really nerdy because there's all these people from up like north, and they come down to Denmark and they're really excited because we want to do something with these like waste streams. So it's fun in many ways.
What objects did you actually create, Bonnie, or have you created?
So last year we did an installation with Dinesen where we worked in their showroom. We created these like different types of walls with the materials, different types of materials, as you said, these 4 types which time I zoomed in on, but from board material to more like a render material, these more like semi-translucent materials and textile materials. So again, just really trying to push other ways that we can work with wood. It's not just, doesn't have to be like this plank, but we can also work with it in other ways. Again, redefining wood, I think that's what we probably would call the project. Yeah. So it's an ongoing research, really, that we just keep pushing the scale again and the possibilities with the wood.
And do you know how these materials will age? They're so new that presumably that must be difficult to predict.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually done... Now back again to my studio materials. We don't know that much with the wood materials, but with our studio materials, we did actually a test with the National History Museum here in Copenhagen. They have a fascinating laboratory, and we ran some tests to see how the materials actually change over time. Because I was really curious, as you say, how do they look like in 30 years? And so they can actually do this like speeded up processes where we can see how the materials behave over time. And they do a lot of research in conventional plastic and polyurethane foam, bakelite, and some of these like old plastic materials. And so we were comparing it to that, and some of the textiles were like kind of behaving in quite similar way as like conventional plastic that we have. Actually, like obviously plastic lasts a lot longer, but it also, when it gets exposed for sun, it also starts breaking down. So there was like these similarities and then also differences in terms of breakdown. Polyurethane foam, again, that, as soon as it's exposed to UV, then it starts like really crumbling. So we learned a lot, really, and we learned how we could strengthen the materials better and how we could prolong their life. But again, the whole point is also not to create linear materials that cannot be broken down. So I think this is kind of the core challenge that we always face with, or we face it quite often with people and clients, is that, we want materials that are sustainable and circular, but they also need to last forever. And it's like, you can't really have both, but I think at least what we try to work with is the circularity and the possibility of being able to recast. So say the textiles needs to be recasted, whenever say we want to recast them in 10 years time, we can recast them and then we can reshape them into another form or another object. So it's like, in that sense, we can offer the system, and also, I think, the repair system as well, because if anything breaks, it can just be recasted.
So nothing goes to landfill. people like you always get asked by people like me about the question of scale. The materials you create have this strong craft element, as we've discussed. I mean, could they be made at an industrial scale? And would you want them to be made industrially?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I feel like it's often part of these like discussions as well. What I really like is that I think it actually raises questions to the question, because it's like these expectations that we have. This is how we know that things are being produced at the moment on this like very industrial scale. But really, I believe in that we can also produce in other ways. Like we see the same with farming at the moment. We have these like massive farms that produce a lot, but then we actually have this push for like small farms, small individual farms, like more locally, that supply more locally, and it just encourages, and it's a lot more healthy for the soil to produce in that way. So I see the same a little bit here, and then maybe I see what is interesting, instead of like setting up this like massive production plant, say, and then supply out in the world and export around. And I rather want to actually set up like satellites around the world and then produce locally, but with the knowledge that we have generated, so that becomes global. I think I believe more in that really than setting up this massive plant and then just exporting.
Sure. Thinking globally, acting locally.
Yeah, I think so, really.
Yeah.
And also it's really fun, because then again, we can work with the local materials and we can work with the local people. It makes a lot more sense, I think, to work in that way.
How did you discover that you wanted to work with materials in the first instance, Bonnie? Because you have this kind of fascinating educational background.
Fascinating.
Well, it is. I mean, it's really, really
That's
interesting.
A diplomatic way of saying.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I'm right in saying that you studied Nordic literature and art for your BA.
Yeah.
Before doing interaction design as an MA in Aarhus. So when did you decide you wanted to be a designer? Were you writing an essay about Nordic literature and thought, no, this isn't for me anymore?
Yeah, I think I got a bit sick of like literature by that like end of that education. But no, I think I really needed to have things in my hand, really, and create things. And in between, I went to this entrepreneurial school called the Chaos Pilots, and they practice like really systemic thinking and circular thinking, just like a little bit more out there of like innovative kind of people. And so I really got into this like mindset of, okay, how can we think differently around production and people and organizations? Also, I started then working a lot with organizations and as a consultant of how can we be more sustainable within organizations. So that's actually how I started my career. And then discovered that I needed to have things in my hand and create the difference that I believed in, create the change, instead of trying to kind of encourage other people to do the difference. Then I think I realized I had to do it myself if I wanted to make a change in this world. And so that was the starting point of the studio.
Right. So in other words, when you were doing your interaction MA, were you messing about with materials then?
Yeah.
It came later. Oh, you were then? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like a big focus really for the research and for the whole kind of, the research center that I was connected to as well. Obviously, interaction design can also be a lot about digital interaction and technology and these things. But we also had a strong emphasis on materials actually and the human connection that we have for interaction with the world. Like, every time we touch an interface, for example, we're touching materials. So that the whole area of the materials and the human interaction with the world was what I was fascinated about really and became really nerdy about. And then I let all the guys do all the coding and all the digital stuff.
Were you always making things as a child? Did you come from a very creative household?
That's a funny question. Yes and no. I think, I think I had a fascination with textiles, actually. I was like doing a lot of my grandma, she was like a sewer. They were doing like gloves.
Okay.
And like,
sewing gloves,
like, fur jackets and stuff. So they had like a company doing that. And so we were sewing a lot with a lot of textiles, I think, when I was young. But I think the reason maybe why I am as I am, I think I've grown up in a family where it wasn't that strict in that sense that there was not really any kind of norms of how we should do things in a certain way. You know, like when we have this like, nah, this is not how we do things because, you know, this is how the world runs. But there was nobody that really told me how the world runs, I think. So I think I've just been let it free in that sense. I think up in the head of, you know, we can imagine the world differently and we can think of the world differently. And then obviously when you grow older and you start becoming adult, then you're like realizing, okay, you know, I think I started questioning like, well, why does the world have to run like this when we could do it other ways? And I think that's the engine really of the studio.
So what were you like at school? Did you enjoy school?
I think I was questioning things a lot. I think I was a really annoying student, really. I think I was asking a lot of questions. I think it was my way of keeping entertained or keeping, you know, awake, I think, to keep questioning. But I don't know. I've always had that drive to question things and ask, like, put things upside down and be like, well, what if we did it this way? Or that kind of motivation for improvement, I think, all the time, like improving and optimizing, I think, without sounding too like agile consultants.
When you won an award from Dinesen, the judges described your work as uncompromising. Is that how you view it?
Yeah, I think I like that, actually. I try to, not go and compromise. I mean, obviously there is always like some compromises you have to go on. I like that phrase, really. There was also last year like a person that said like Renaissance woman. And I really like that like phrase as well, because it's quite fun. I was like looking up and being like, what does he actually mean by this? But it's really like this hybrid kind of person that really want to change the world in a way. And I feel quite like good in that kind of title. Not being too like grand and everything, but we're really small, so we're just doing it at a small scale. I think we're doing it we're not like, I'm not like a massive company that goes out and do like massive change, every day, which is fantastic. They're doing great work. I think we're doing it in a little bit like more activistic way. So like with these small projects, I really want to try and push the agenda and push the questioning really in a more activist way than massive production way. I think maybe that's what I can contribute with in this world.
That's quite interesting. I guess it leads to two questions. One of which is, if your work is uncompromising, do you see yourself as uncompromising as well?
Maybe define uncompromising then.
Well, I guess it takes a path and is less than willing to deviate.
Yeah, I think I have strong ambitions, really. I think I always try to push it as far as, well, we could push it maybe even further, But I think we have, at the same time, I have this like quite organic way of operating. So I'm not like going to push it like mad, like now we just need to go massive scale and massive production all over the world. And I think I'm quite happy in this organic way of growing a studio as well, and not just suddenly having to like get massive investors in and go mad. And then, so I think for me, it's more about being balanced and doing it in the right way instead of just like being completely uncompromised about everything, because it can be a little bit mad, can it? Like, a little bit. It can actually be a little bit mad, can it? It's not so collaborative either, is it?
No, probably not.
There's always compromises with people. Actually, I think I'm quite compromise searching, really, like with people, because that's at the end of the day is the way that makes things happen. It's actually sometimes to search the compromises.
Did you have a vision for the studio when you opened it in 2019? I mean, are you where you thought you would be?
No, I had no idea. No, I had no idea where we were going. I think I had a vision. I started like a first research with a material. I had this vision of like wanting to create a chair. I think that was the motivation for me. I was like, okay, I want to make a chair because it's like, that's functional. You can sit on it and then it's kind of like, check, I've done it.
Everybody loves a chair. Designers obsessed with chairs. What is that about? I guess it's because they touch the body and all that. Yeah.
I think so. So I think that was kind of, okay, when I've done that, then I'm happy. And then it just took like a completely different direction. And I ended up making like installations and working with architects and all sorts. Yeah, I've still done a few chairs though, but there's more to it than chairs.
There's more to life than chairs.
Yeah.
Oh, you talk about collaboration just then, and I'm always kind of interested. I'm presuming you have to be quite careful with the brands you work with. I mean, are they companies that you wouldn't collaborate with? Do you have a sense of where to draw the line?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, that, because I think I can sense it on people, like what the driven, like the motivation when they reach out. And this is a discussion that we also have often with, because we're not just a material supplier, we're a design studio. And for some, it can be quite difficult for people to understand, because they're like, well, we just want your materials. And it's like, yeah, but it doesn't work like that, because we're a design studio and we need to be involved in design because these materials behave in a certain way and we need to work with them in a certain way. And therefore, we need to collaborate. And so when you say that to some, it's like, yeah, but everything's already drawn up and set and we just need these materials. And we're like, yeah, but that's not us then, because it's not how we work. Because if you want to work with our materials, then we might have to change your design. We might have to change your setup. So it's a collaboration. So I think this word collaboration is probably what we try to push for. And I think that I feel like it really rounds the whole, when we talk about systemic understanding, it's not just about systemic understanding around materials. It's also about the way we operate and make people understand that we equal and we collaborate and we work together, and not just like this like top-down supplier structure that there is in the building sector, where it's like you supply to us and we tell you what to do. And it just doesn't work anymore, that way of operating, not at least in my opinion. So I think that's what we really try to push for. And I feel like that comes with the materials. It comes a new way of not just designing, but also working together and making things work.
Very good. We are drawing towards the end of our time.
Yeah.
You have a small child you need to look after.
I think she's getting hungry soon, yeah.
Let's ask the final question in that case, Bonnie, which is the Material Way will be at Material Matters London. But after that, what does the future hold for you and the Natural Materials Studio?
I think the last few years we've been really installational and really trying to bring forward our research and material understanding and production capacity. And in that, we've had a lot of fun with a lot of different collaborators and done a lot of commissions. And I think just over these last years, we're really starting to understand how our materials behave, as you said, also over time, and how we technically can work with the materials. So we're really starting to get this understanding of creating, objects and producing like functional works that we can put out in like more domestic kind of settings as well. So that's kind of been the direction really naturally for the studio, to bring these objects out that you can live and interact with on a daily basis. So that's basically what's happening more and more in the studio. We're having a really exciting first gallery show in LA next year. And we'll see what happens from there, I think. And then obviously we have a lot of fun projects in between. But yeah, so I think some good things happening.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, Bonnie, I know you've got a lot on. Thank you so much for your time. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Thank you very much for the questions, really.
Find out more about Natural Materials Studio at naturalmaterialstudio.com, while The Material Way is at thematerialway.com. You can go to our website, materialmatters.design, to hear other podcasts that I've done, to sign up to our newsletter, and to find out all about Material Matters London, which runs from the 17th to the 20th of September at Space House. You'll also find our new bookshop, which is very, very exciting. One more thing, it would make me incredibly happy if you went to my Patreon page and made a pledge at patreon.com/Material Matters. For as little as £3.50 a month, you can receive invites to various Material Matters events, as well as getting access to each episode before it's published to the wider world. Material Matters is a completely independent concern, and any help you can offer would be hugely appreciated. Ultimately, you'll be helping to take the message of the importance of materials, skill, craft, and design to a whole new audience. Thanks very much for listening.